Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I would like to introduce Mayor Bill Partington.
Thank you. Good evening. It's great to be with you. I love this room. Usually when I'm here, it is to present the Teacher of the Quarter Awards or do the DARE graduation. And it's a kids center, and the disco lights are going, the slime is coming down, the kids are playing on the stage. And so seeing it set up like this tonight is a new experience, but it is great to see everybody here. Welcome on behalf of the City of Ormond Beach. I want to introduce a couple people. First, Joyce Shanahan, our city manager. Our deputy mayor and Zone 2 commissioner, Troy Kent, in the black shirt at the back of the room. And our Zone 1 commissioner, Dwight Selby, also in the back. We want you to feel welcomed and comfortable tonight. This commission asked our staff to come up with this process where we could hear from our residents. And this is what they have developed, similar to the New Smyrna Beach series of events, but we told them we wanted it to be better, improve on that process if you can, and I think they have. So you're in for a great evening. Welcome and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the mayor said, tonight is all about talking about Ormond Beach. How can we maintain the character and charm of this wonderful community? We held a series of similar meetings in 2015. They were called a community conversation, and we got the feedback from all of the residents, and the commission used that input and developed their 2016 strategic plan. So this year we have lots of topics. On your table is a little card that tells you all of the meetings that we're going to be having, so that we thought that there was many more things that we wanted to talk about and couldn't get it all done in one night. So unless we kept you here till midnight, so we didn't want to do that. So that is the schedule of all the upcoming workshops. Also on your table is a yellow card. If you could fill that out, that would be great. That way we can communicate with you. We will just keep a list. We didn't want to have a sign-in sheet because it would take too long to get everybody signed in. You can just leave that card on your table at the end. And now we are pleased to have the University of Central Florida Institute of Government, Rafael Montalvo, doing the facilitation for this meeting tonight. He's a professional facilitator. He works with groups like this all the time. So Rafael, I'd like to turn the program over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Joyce. Good evening, everyone. This is a wonderful turnout for a conversation like this. I want to add my thanks to you for coming tonight. A couple of words about my role here and that of my colleagues, whom I'll introduce in just a moment. As Joyce just said, we're here through the Institute of Government at UCF. We are also here under the auspices of something called the FCRC Consensus Center, which is a group set up by the legislature to help folks in Florida have conversations about public policy issues, and to do that as, I'll put this in quotes, but as neutrals. Certainly to do that impartially and to develop processes and run them in such a way that it maximizes the chance of all perspectives being heard and everyone having a chance to contribute. So that's our role here tonight. We're not with the city. It'll be myself, Hal Beardall, my colleague from Tallahassee, and Mariah Rains, somewhere in the room, with the Institute of Government. It will be a challenge tonight. As you look around you, you can probably tell that. We have 2 hours and upwards probably of 300 people in the room. So we'll need your help to keep things moving and to in fact ensure that all perspectives can be heard. What I'd like to do is go over the agenda and some of the guidelines for tonight's meeting, and then just jump into it since time is tight. First, tonight's meeting is on community development. We understand that some aspects of that topic are very timely in the community at the moment. Those are certainly appropriate for tonight, but tonight is broader than that. The Commission will be undertaking a strategic planning process in the fall, and what we're here for tonight, more broadly, is to begin to solicit input for that process. Input on the topic of community development, input on what you value most about living in Ormond Beach, and input on, particularly on what you think it's most important to achieve in the area of community development, most important for the city of Ormond Beach to achieve in the area of community development over the next 5 years. So we are asking you to think a little more broadly than just the conversations that are taking place today. The flow of the agenda is pretty straightforward. We have a couple of presentations designed to provide you a common base of information about what community development is in Ormond Beach and the plans and processes that influence it. Also a presentation on the Main Street Ormond Beach program, just sort of falls under that topic. Once we've done that, we're going to ask you we're going to have a variety of ways for you to offer input in response to that. First, we will ask everybody to work with, you'll see some things that look like keychains at your tables. Those are key fobs that will allow you to respond to some very broad questions about how you like living in Ormond Beach, how you think the city's doing on this issue, and who's in the room. You know, who's here with you? Who are your neighbors here with you? That'll be very brief. We may use those more extensively in subsequent meetings, but tonight that's not the focus, it's just the framework. Once we've done that, we'll turn to table discussions, and we'll ask you 3 questions in those table discussions, and you do not have to agree at your table. The input tonight is individual. The conversation is so you can hear from your neighbors about what's important to them. But the 3 questions are, what do you value most about living in the city of Ormond Beach? What do you think the opportunities and challenges are for the city in the area of community development? And then the key question for the night, what is it most important for the city of Ormond Beach to achieve in the area of community development over the next 5 years? We didn't know how many people we'd have in the room. We made a commitment that every single one of your answers, you will be asked to pick the single most important thing individually, not as a table, individually, that every one of your answers will be heard tonight. Obviously, with 300 people in the room, that means you can't all stand up and give your answer. But when we get to that point in the process, we'll explain how to offer your answer, and we'll make sure it gets heard. So we'll have a clear idea what folks in this room tonight think is the range of single most important things. And the commission will have that input to work with. That process will be a little intricate, but by that time we think you'll be up to speed enough to work with it. We'll have lots of people in the room that you can call over and ask for help if you need it. But that's the flow of the agenda. Every single bit of input that you offer in writing tonight on the Post-its, on comment forms, on question cards, all of those are going to be, and certainly on the polling, all of those will be in use at some point tonight. Every single bit of that input will be in the meeting summary today. Any question you submit in writing during tonight's meeting that we don't get to answer fully in the room, and with this many people, we will not be able to answer all your questions tonight, will be answered online, transcribed and answered online within 10 business days. You will also have an opportunity for those of you who want to give Tolstoy a run for his money and write your version of War and Peace that won't fit on the comment cards. You'll be able to do that online after the meeting. There will be an opportunity to provide more extensive narrative online comments. So we're trying to open it up to as many types of avenues of input as possible. And simultaneously give everyone a chance to have their perspective heard, talk to neighbors, and stay within the time available. Help us with that. If you turn to page 2 in your packet, there are some discussion guidelines. These are pretty straightforward. It's on the back of page 1. They're common rules of civility, really. Expect and respect different perspectives at your table, and certainly in the room. We're here to hear all perspectives, even if they're dramatically different from your own. At least tonight, speak to be understood when you're in your table discussions, not necessarily to persuade. You won't get everybody to think exactly as you do, but you'll all be better off if as you hear each other tonight, you've tried to help others understand how you see it. Explain your assumptions. If you ask questions, ask them to understand, not to attack a particular point of view. Focus on issues, not individuals. To be heard, be willing to listen. And share the airtime and help us share the airtime. We'll have, again, some specific instructions for the activities that'll help you do that. But, the first two are the most important. Expect and respect different perspectives. Speak to be understood, not to persuade tonight. And listen to understand. Just listening doesn't mean you agree. It means you're trying to understand what the person is saying. And again, our hope is that if you do that tonight, you will come away with a fuller understanding of how your community thinks and have a better basis for your own actions and activities going forward. Your input, there's a little section on that page about how your input will be used tonight, after tonight. Again, it's going to the commission for their use in updating the strategic plan. This is one of a series of meetings. There will be a report transcribing all input for each of those meetings. You'll have online opportunities between meetings. It'll be quite a volume of material, and it will all be accessible. And again, the target is 10 business days after each meeting. All of that will be transcribed and online. We are recording this. There will be a video, not a very fancy video. It's a static video from the back of the room, but this will be recorded. And the presentations will be posted on the city's website also. So I think that's largely it for now. Hal, is there anything okay? All right, so we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll ask Stephen Spraker, the Director of Planning for the City of Ormond Beach, to come up and give us some information. Now, a word before Stephen gets started. You will see at your tables white cards, question cards. As he is speaking and as Julia, who will follow him, is speaking, write your questions on these. If you have more than one question, you can use Post-its, you can use the back of this, and put them in the bowl. After the speakers are done, we will come around and take one question from each table, read it out, and answer it. With this many people and questions, we may not be able to answer all of them in the time available. Again, we will post the questions we don't get to and answers from staff online within 10 business days of the meeting. But write them down as you think of them, and it'll make it likelier that you won't forget when we come to that point of the presentation.
Good evening. My name is Steve Spraker. I'm the planning director for the city of Ormond Beach. Tonight, my presentation is going to focus on community development. Community development really is the method in which privately owned properties and even publicly owned properties are developed over time. It is basically how a city grows and develops over a course of time. There are multiple components, but my slide kind of focuses on some of the components for community development. The first component that I want to talk about is the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is the city's overriding vision of how the city will develop over time. It contains goals, objectives, policies that guide the future development of the city. It also contains the level of service standards for the city's roadways, for our water and sewer, park and recreation, and stormwater. So it's the framework of how the city is going to develop. The city's comprehensive plan then takes those visions and puts it into the land development code. It's more of a how-to. So there are specific zoning districts which have permitted and conditional uses which are approved by city staff, and then there are special exception uses and planned developments which require public hearing. So from everything from accessory uses on your single-family homes to how a commercial project is contained within that land development code. And both of those documents are livable, breathable documents that are amended over time as community standards change, as state mandates come down. So those two documents are changeable. Public participation and input is a key aspect of community development. It is all throughout community development. For example, within our land development code, where a commercial site abuts a residential site, it has to do a neighborhood meeting. Even if it's a permitted use, it still has to go through that process to garner the neighborhood input. Our public hearings require notice that try to garner that public input. There are criteria in our land development code that seeks to gain that public input. Another important component is the city site plan review committee. That is a committee made up of all the various departments that review development projects as they come in. So they review subdivisions and commercial site plans, and they're reviewing it against that land development code and comprehensive plan. So they're seeing that projects are consistent with those two documents. The city has a number of master plans, and these master plans are, for example, the downtown master plan, stormwater master plan, the park and recreation master plan, and then our utility master plan. And they're guiding how the city grows and develops. And again, the public participation is a part of it. The downtown master plan and the stormwater master plan are set to be updated in the next year in 2019. So those will have forums where people can come and say what's good and bad or how the downtown should be developed and redeveloped. And then the final component is our city commission and our city boards, and they set the policy directive. So they're overriding, they're citing policy direction for the comprehensive plan, land development code, those public applications that are going through a special exception or plan development or some type of public hearing. Our advisory boards provide input to those city commissions. So they're providing, whether it be historic preservation, whether it be land development code, or quality of life issues. In the 2015 strategic plan, the North US 1 corridor was highlighted as an important corridor that the city really wasn't satisfied of how this gateway was being developed. The city worked with Volusia County, and we entered into an interlocal service boundary agreement. So the city took control of basically everything from the Flagler County line to the Tomoka River, whether you're in the city or not in the city. So the goal here is to implement the city standards for architecture and redevelopment to try to change the visual characteristics of this corridor. The city also went through and obtained a brownfield grant so we could redevelop gas stations or sites with some type of hazardous contaminants to be brought back into the development. One example of a redevelopment property is 1545 North US 1. It was a nightclub that was developed into a retail store, again with building architecture and site designs meeting today's current code. The US 1 corridor has seen private investment. The SR Parat is an industrial facility which developed over 2 phases in the last 5 years. And this provides kind of the economic base that they're trying to obtain within this North US 1 corridor. The city has also been fortunate to work with the North US 1 Coalition and get landscaping as part of the public improvements within this corridor. So they went to the State Department of Transportation and they got landscaping for both the interchange and for the medians. So it's kind of the public-private partnership of trying to redevelop the properties and then redevelop the public lands. Another key part of the 2015 strategic plan was our city's downtown and our downtown master plan. And there's really 2 components I wanted to talk about. One was the capital projects and the second one was the grants. So our capital projects, some examples are our Vining Court streetscape, again trying to add pedestrian facilities to our downtown, trying to soften some of the streets which are oversized. Another recent example is on Lincoln Avenue. There was a stormwater pond that was done underground, and then the surface was done as a park. So it's providing stormwater for the downtown area, it's providing a park for the Lincoln Avenue area, and basically implementing some of the goals and objectives of our downtown master plan. Another example is our utilities undergrounding on West Granada Boulevard from Beach Street to US 1. Our master plan is trying to get a more pedestrian feel for that West Granada corridor. We were able to underground the utilities and then put streetscape and pedestrian access through that corridor. And I'm going to come over here because I feel like I'm
talk to the other half of the room.
Correct. So the downtown also has had several redevelopments. This was the former Halifax Urban Ministry building at 164 West Granada. It was redeveloped into a mixed-use building with commercial on the ground floor and residential. And there's other redevelopment. Starbucks at the Granada Plaza is going in where a vacant building is. So you're starting to see some of that downtown redevelopment. Another key part of the downtown master plan has been the city's use of grants. Since 2005, there's been 60 grants that have been used within the downtown area. And the goal of the grant program was to become a partner with the businesses. So the city could do the work on the public side. We could do streetscapes, and we could do all the stuff on the capital side. But if you didn't have reinvestment and you didn't have that private investment, you're only having half the equation. So since 2005, there's been $2 million, a little over $2 million paid in grant funds. And that's translated to over $10 million in private investment that is eligible for the grant. Now for the grant, you're only allowed to do exterior. So people are also doing interior work and other site improvements. Examples include the Children's Workshop at 506 Lincoln Avenue, and then the Whole Seafood at 111 West Granada. These were both grant recipients over the last couple of years. So the goal is to get both the private and the public working together to transform that corridor. Redevelopment within the city has been a key issue. I think everyone will remember the Texaco at the corner of Nova Road and West Granada Boulevard. Took a long time to redevelop, to put together with the Burger King. And now we have the CVS, which again has implemented the building architecture standards within the land development code, and then the landscaping. Other examples include the Sunoco's. This was the one at 3 North US 1. So those have redeveloped over time. Sorry. So those have redeveloped over time, trying to transform some of these older sites that have issues into some newer sites. And these had to go through plan development because our land development code didn't really recognize the older style development. So the plan development helped to redevelop some of these properties. A pending redevelopment project is the gas station at the corner of Williamson and West Granada Boulevard. It is the former Kangaroo gas station, and there is current applications for a Chase Bank to, again, remove what you see as a gas station, put in landscaping, and putting a building that conforms to our architectural standards. A key part of community development is how we manage the public lands, our park and recreations. The city has a total of 508 acres for city parks, and that's kind of separate of the state park and the beach. So our parks are 508 acres, and we have a total of 46 parks. Over the last few years, one of the key development has been Andy Romano Park, funded through bond financing, to create a community park which is basically unrivaled in the state of Florida, that basically provides beachfront access and activities along this corridor. Another example of park development has been within Central Park. There has been 8 acres added in 2013. The total park acreage is 150, and then the Environmental Discovery Center was constructed in 2015 and 2016, further enhancing the park development and redevelopment. How does a site plan or a subdivision go through the process? That's something that's asked of me a lot. So I thought I would just take an opportunity to quickly go through this slide. The first step of any site plan or subdivision is the site plan review committee. That's that administrative committee, and they're reviewing against the land development comprehensive plan and even the master plans to make sure that the projects are consistent. If the project abuts a residential area, no matter if it's a permitted, conditional, or special exception use, it has to go through a neighborhood meeting. That neighborhood meeting is an advertised meeting within 600 feet of the property, so it goes through that. If it doesn't abut a residential area, it continues going on through the site plan process. For those projects that are public hearings, the special exceptions and the plan developments, so they're doing something that is not a conditional or permitted use. So either they're asking for flexibility on certain standards, or based on the location, they have to be approved through a special exception. The planning board is the next step, and they are an advisory board to the city commission. They take in the input and they provide a recommendation to the city commission. The city commission then provides the final action on the special exceptions and plan developments, and then the project will go back to the site plan review committee, incorporating any changes through the public hearing process, and then obtain their site and building permits, and then do the inspections, and eventually, hopefully, get their certificate of occupancy. So that's a quick summary of how a project moves forward. This slide shows the city's vacant commercial and industrially zoned property. The area is in blue, and I know this is hard to read in the back, and it will be on our website. But the areas in blue are the vacant lands. There's, again, a lot along US 1. The area in brown is Ormond Crossings, and the hatched area are vacant areas that have development orders. One of the key vacant pieces of land is Ormond Crossings. It's unique in that it is geared more towards office and industrial development. The amount of commercial square footage is relatively small in this project. The commercial square footage would be between the railroad track and US 1. So this is more geared towards high-paying jobs, offices, industrial, manufacturing, and then there's also residential along the boundary of the Flagler County line. From the east of I-95 to the railroad track, that is also a business park. Again, trying to create jobs, trying to create higher paying wages. It's coming, sorry. And the Granada corridor is always a very important corridor within our city. In our downtown area, there are 5 properties that are vacant currently. These are ranging in sizes. The total vacant acreage is 2.9 acres. And again, these are clustered. There's 1 on the beach side and then 4 within the remaining part. Along West Granada, from Orchard Street to Clyde Morris, there's 2 vacant tracts. Both of them have development orders. The first is Antares, which is a assisted living facility, and the second is Ormond Central. So those 2 projects have approved development orders. One has gone through that site plan review committee process, and the other has gone through a plan development process with review by the planning board and the city commission. Those 2 projects total 15.5 acres. And again, those are the approved projects. From Clyde Morris Boulevard going out to the western city limits, there's about 7 projects that are vacant. The total acreage is approximately 39.5 acres, of which there's 1 property that's 24 acres at the intersection of West Granada Boulevard and Timber Creek Road. There is, for example, Breakaway Trails. That is for the internal residents of Breakaway Trails. So unless you live in that subdivision, that parcel wouldn't be available to the general public. There are 2 properties that have approved development orders. The first is the Shops on Granada Phase 2. It's an expansion of where the Panera and the Chipotle is, and that is 5.33 acres. And then there is a multifamily complex along Interchange just off Granada Boulevard that's approved at 6.5 acres of land. Switching from the commercial development to the residential development, the city's growth rate from 2010 to 2017 is approximately 1.06%. We're in the middle of the top 10 cities. Population growth comes from development of residential uses such as single-family homes, and it also comes from annexation. So we've annexed some of the properties along Williamson, the San Marco and Crown Point apartments, so that has helped our population grow. This slide shows the number of single-family home permits from 2000 to current. From 2000 to 2005, we were averaging 267 single-family home permits a year. During the recession, that dipped down to 71 single-family home permits a year. And then over the last 5 years, it's gone back up. It's 127 single-family home permits. The current year, we're at 36 single-family home permits. The development of the single-family home permits have come in basically 3 subdivisions. The Chelsea Place, Phase 3 has been built out. River Oak subdivision has built out over the last few years. And the Deer Creek subdivision has built out since 2006, and they're completing their project. In looking at how we compare to other jurisdictions, the city of Ormond Beach is 5th in Volusia County over the last year in terms of the number of single-family home permits. We have 134 single-family home permits. DeLand, New Smyrna Beach, Daytona Beach, and Port Orange have more over the last quarter. This slide shows what we have left in our vacant residential land. Where we see future growth in the long term is Plantation Oaks, which is currently in unincorporated Volusia County. They are receiving our water, so eventually that project will be annexed into the city of Ormond Beach. The Ormond Crossings area will provide future growth. There is no infrastructure, so it's not going to be in the short term. There still needs to be water, sewer, and roadways extended to it. The Cypress Trail subdivision is under construction today. They have 48 lots. The Pineland subdivision has approval for construction. They haven't started yet. That's 192 lots between those 2 properties. That is 240 single-family homes, and those are the 2 subdivisions that have been approved. The Marshside subdivision is proposed subdivision. It's 144 lots. It still has to go through that process. So it's still, if you remember that slide, it's still at the site plan level. So they still have to go through their neighborhood meeting, planning board, and city commission. So these are the projects that are going to be where our new single-family homes are located. That total is 384 units for single family. I appreciate being able to address this group. We do a monthly development report that contains all our residential and commercial projects. Within that page, you can find the site plan for each applications. So if you go to that page, you can look and see what's been submitted to the site plan review committee, and then take a look. Our monthly development report, you can also come to room 104 at City Hall, or you can get it by email, and that is my contact information. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, while Julia is coming up, Julia Trujillo is Executive Director of the Main Street Ormond Beach program. Before
Spell my name.
Oh my, Trujillo.
That's not how you spell my name.
Before Julia gets started, take a moment. If you have questions to Stephen, write them down. It doesn't have to be, a paragraph, just enough for us to be able to understand the question when we come around or when we try to answer it after the meeting. So just take a moment if you have questions. If you want them answered during the meeting, or at least a shot at answering them during the meeting, put them in the bowl. I'll take just a moment.
Good evening.
Okay.
My name is Julia Trujillo, and I am the Executive Director for Ormond Beach Main Street, which is a private, nonprofit organization that works on downtown redevelopment. So like many of you, we hear this all the time. We don't have a downtown. Our downtown will never be as good as DeLand. The only reason to drive on Granada is to get as fast as possible from my house to fill in the blank. I've lived here my whole life and I don't even know where downtown is. And last but not least, Main Street is in Daytona, not in Ormond Beach. We know. But we do have a downtown. But it doesn't look like this. So how can it be a downtown? A downtown is more than a place, it's a feeling. It's the way you feel about your town It's the things that bring you into the city center. It's a place for independent businesses to thrive, where they can use buildings that are already available. It's a place for office space, and it's a place for events that bring the community together. It's the things you think about when you think about community. Ormond Beach Main Street is very involved in all the projects that you saw in Stephen's slide for downtown. We want positive change in downtown. How many of you remember what Rose Villa used to look like? How many of you were in it when the stairs were falling down? Like most towns, we went through years of suburbanization, draw away from city center. But times have changed, and people start to recognize how important downtown is. So what makes a community that you want to live in? A sense of place. All those things in your community when somebody says, what makes Ormond Beach? The places you go, the places you think of. Of course, things to do. And of places that you can meet your fellow citizens and visitors and enjoy what we have to offer. But mostly, downtown is people. 3,000 people who work in downtown, more than 1,300 housing units, and over 150 businesses. Not all big businesses, most of them tiny. Lots of 1- and 2-person businesses, but a lot of businesses. All in this little tiny space. That's 1.76 miles from A1A to Orchard Street, all along Granada and about 2 blocks wide. So, we're Ormond Beach Main Street. What does that mean? As I said, we're a private nonprofit. We were founded by a group of 4 private citizens in the mid-90s. We're run by a volunteer board. We have every year, between our board, our committees, our events, about 250 people who volunteer, who give more than 3,000 hours every year to downtown community. And we work with all the downtown stakeholders, no matter whether they're members of our organization or not. Citizens, businesses, government, all of the people who are invested in downtown community. So why is it called Main Street? We'll get that over with. That's the other question we get besides, why is it called Main Street? We don't have a Main Street. Why is it called Main Street? Obviously, our Main Street is Granada Boulevard, but we belong to the Main Street program. It's a national program run out of the Department of Historic Preservation, and we belong to the Florida Main Street group. There are 50 Main Streets in Florida, including DeLand, and there are over 2,000 Main Street programs in the United States. That's our mission. We're dedicated to a vibrant downtown community. Economic growth, good design, great events. Economic growth for downtowns is strategically important to a town because your heart is healthy. All these things can happen. And all those 150 businesses are taxpayers. Taxpayers, business taxpayers, put in more and take out less than residents. You saw some of these businesses in Stephen's slide, so I'll whip through here. Children's Workshop doubled their size. Frame of Mind, our little frame shop and art shop, rents out space to a brand new local coffee bar, which uses locally roasted coffee beans, which started got their start in the farmer's market, and baked goods from our great award-winning bakery 2 doors down at Cake Recreation. It's the perfect synergy for downtown small business. And of course, Hulls, if you haven't been there yet, 110 new seats. This is a family business, a business that has been in downtown, has been a supporter of downtown for several generations. Hulls is invested in Ormond Beach. My favorite slide. Why buy local? Because local loves you. 4 times the amount of money stays in the community, 250% more given back to community through charity, sports teams, all kinds of support. We keep growing. These are great statistics. 13 new businesses, 45 full-time equivalent jobs, and well over $1 million worth of private investment, all into renewing standing buildings. Now, of course, we do events. We love events. Everybody loves events. But we're not just party people. 40,000 people come downtown because of Main Street's events every year, and there are many more events that bring them as well. This is just our events. And it's not just local, regional, and for our Celtic Festival, national visitors. The thing about coming downtown to an event is that I'm just like the rest of you. I get in my car, I am going to fill in the blank, wherever it is. I don't really look out the window very much. I mean, I do because I'm supposed to be looking at my district, but when I'm not in my district, I don't always look out and say, oh, look, there's a new coffee shop. Look, there's a bookstore. Look, there's a new dress shop. When you come to an event and you park your car and you walk, you see pedestrian level interest. Now, because we are a nonprofit and a separate group, we can use our sponsorships and our in-kind donations to really boost getting the word out. We had over 3 million digital impressions last year from the various outlets that we use. 9,000 Facebook followers, 136,000 website page views, 200,000 plus monthly eBlast subscribers, and of course all the print ads we do locally, regionally, and some nationally. So let's talk about design. We're not going to look like New England. I heard somebody mention that. We can't look like New England. So what do we look like? Looks a little like New England to me. Stephen talked about this beautiful streetscape. It's only a few years old. How many of you really, think carefully, really remember what it looked like before that happened? So, as I said, renovation and restoration of existing downtown buildings, making a less suburban downtown, one that is more pedestrian-friendly and less car-friendly. Shared parking, an important part of any kind of planning. Interesting in inviting building fronts and mixed-use properties to help bring residential and business together into the district. Okay, this is an amazing reuse project. 31 West Granada Boulevard. That is 31 before, and now 31 Supper Club. It was an office supply store, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, sorry, Dorian. So why improve? Economic improvement, visitor experience, pride, and community engagement. This is East Granada. Changes to storefronts make a difference even if you're not changing the whole building. So Granada Plaza back in the 80s, Granada Plaza now. When Granada Plaza came after this grant, the city worked with them, we worked with them to try to get this varied storefront, to get color, to make an inviting place. We believe very strongly that as a nonprofit, we work with community partnership. We work with the city, the state, particularly with the Florida Department of Transportation, looking for better ways to bring people downtown. We are very positive about public art. I don't know how better way to say that. We created the Ormond Beach Arts District several years ago, and now it's its own private nonprofit. Public art is a way to bring people together. And we serve as the review committee for the building improvement grants. Main Street preaches small changes over time. Signage, our great crosswalk. I think I can announce this now. We just won an award for that crosswalk at the state level. Improved Pedestrian Experience Award. All kinds of identification markers, and the beautiful park at Lincoln. A small thing. If you haven't been there, I suggest you stop by for half an hour and enjoy that beautiful park. These are our goals over time. And that brings me to my last slide. What still needs to be done? Always we talk about what still needs to be done, what's next. And that's your part of this discussion. We need you to tell us what's important to you in downtown, to participate in this discussion, to participate in the redevelopment of the master plan, but also come be a volunteer with us. Come talk to us, talk to our committees, volunteer at the festivals, be part of what we're doing downtown. Julia Truillo, spelled correctly because I wrote it myself. And my email address, julia@ormondmainstreet.com. I look forward to hearing from and working with all of you.
Thank you. Now, we have about a half hour for questions and answers. Again, I'll reiterate, and probably will several times this evening, we won't get to all your questions, but we will answer any question that's left in the bowl online within 10 days. In the meantime, we'll try to make the best use of the time we have. Hal is going to come around with a microphone and go table by table picking questions at random. If there's nothing in your bowl, we'll skip over you. We'll assume you'll put the questions in at the end of the meeting, so we'll answer them over online. I'll ask Stephen and Julia to come up. And guys, this is a bit of a challenge. We're probably going to ask you for the short version of the answer, and you can elaborate later online. But that'll probably be the best way to get to as many questions as possible. So Hal, where are we starting?
Being sure I'm on here. I'm just going to start up here in the front. Sorry, excuse my reach. And I just sort of reach in as best I can. And I will do my best with your handwriting. Please understand.
If it's your question, you can clarify if Hal gets
What was
wrong.
the thought process behind approving a Wawa station on that section of Granada when there are already multiple gas stations that are less intrusive to the environment?
So if you recall the slide with the development process, that project went through that process. It went through a site plan, it went through a neighborhood meeting, it went through the planning board, and it went through the city commission. So there's a development process that is in place in our city, and it went through that process. It was consistent with the land development code, and it was consistent with the comprehensive plan. That's why we're starting the civic engagement, is to get this feedback, and basically if there are changes that are needed, we can present that to the commission to start that process of what changes will be needed.
I'm going to go out on a limb here a little bit. Do you want to say a little bit about the fact that it's in two parcels and
we can talk about it. I mean,
buffers and such?
the issue with the Granada Point is basically it's separated by two rights-of-way. So it is one project of 32 acres. It's separated by the Tomoka Avenue right-of-way in Granada. It is connected under Granada with stormwater. So basically our code requires 15% tree preservation. That site provided 34% tree preservation, but unfortunately it's all in the north section of the project. Our land development code also requires you know, as you develop and redevelop, you have to be consistent with the federal FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency standards for where your buildings are on the property, which requires a lot of fill on this property. So as the project redevelops, it'll have the preservation area, it'll have 10 acres, which connects to the Three Chimneys properties, which connects to other properties which total 32 acres in that north corridor between Olive Grove, which was a multifamily development, between Madison Glen. So, and then they'll also replant. So basically, as you go through, you'll have a greenbelt buffer, which will be replanted, which is similar to Lowe's, similar to Shops on Granada. So that will be replanted with trees for preservation.
Okay, thank you. Hal, next question.
Okay, at the next table, question is, at build-out of all vacant and unimproved land, how many additional dwelling units plus commercial square footage is the city zoned for?
We would have to do some analysis to get that number. We went through what the short-term 384 lots if Marshide were approved, and then there are 2 longer-term developments for Ormond Crossings and Plantation Oaks. The commercial is dependent on how sites are developed and redeveloped, so that's a more lengthy answer.
Okay, thanks. Hal.
Okay. All right, pardon me for challenge. I don't want to offend anybody on their handwriting, but it seems that lately the process which allows tree removal has been relaxed and historic trees have been permitted for removal become common practice in Ormond. What is the city doing to restore higher standards for the removal of trees to maintain something in this town?
If it was your item, you're welcome
The
to
beauty
tell
in this
us what-
town. Thank you.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
So the tree ordinance hasn't been amended since 2004. So the same tree ordinance has existed for a number of years. Again, the uniqueness of the Granada Point parcel being over three areas has caused some of that. Basically, historic tree removal is done through site plan review committee and then approved through the city commission. So it follows a process, and it's the same process as has been in place since 2004 for historic trees.
Stephen, if I could risk adding to your question,
Sure.
part of the reason for tonight is to get your input about what should be in that revised strategic plan. So clearly, that question lends itself to being turned into a suggestion to do something. So go ahead.
Okay. What happened to the plan for the development of New Britain Avenue into condos, higher uses? Has it been shelved?
There was never an application. There was an amendment to the land development code for the height. The height was restricted to 2 stories, and the applicant was seeking to go, what was finally approved was 3 stories, and then if you go higher than that, it has to go through a plan development. So there hasn't been any development applications along New Britain Avenue.
Okay. With such a drastic and negative change to the character and the preservation of Granada, why were the citizens not made aware with the plans and consequences before approved by the commission? Ask for citizen input and whether citizens agree with the plan.
Again, I keep relying on the slide that basically goes through the process. So all of our current projects are on the city's website. So each project, through the start of the project, when it's initially submitted, to when it gets approved, is on the city's website. There are neighborhood meetings that are done, and there are planning board meetings, and there are city commission meetings. So it goes through that public hearing process. If there are opportunities through a strategic plan to come up with different routes, I think the city staff is open to that.
What plans do you have for beachside, example A1A?
Unfortunately, there is no master plan right now for the beachside. There are some interim plans to seek to do landscaping medians. There are the redevelopment challenges with A1A is that you have non-conforming lots. So you have small lots abutting residential. So how do you redevelop while protecting the residential and still allowing redevelopment? There are some activities. The county is doing a beachside parking lot, which will demolish the other place and provide off-beach parking. The former, I think it's the former Stacy's, has a site plan approved to convert it to a retail store. So there is some redevelopment coming.
Okay, the question on this card is simply annexation of Ormond by the Sea.
There are no plans of annexing Ormond by the Sea.
Just because we understand there is sometimes some confusion, Ormond by the Sea is an incorporated municipality, is that correct? No, it is not.
It's
Okay.
unincorporated Volusia
Okay.
County.
Okay, what is
I'm
planned?
confused.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
What is planned to make downtown more connected, cohesive, pedestrian friendly?
Half a mile of bridge is a big bridge. We have been working on some plans to help with electric or solar-powered transportation to get people from one side to another. We struggle with the fact that Granada is a state highway and an evacuation route. So we are somewhat limited to what we could do with pedestrian-friendly streetscapes. Doesn't mean we don't need to try, especially on East Granada, where the streetscape is less inviting for walkers. I am one of them. I live in the neighborhood and walk that neighborhood, and the traffic and the sidewalks are less inviting. But the part of our challenge, I think, and one that we should take seriously, is developing that part of the downtown so that it incorporates more daily living, whether that be more offices with workers, more residents, because you get caught in the balance of the FDOT says we don't need a mid-block crossing, for instance, on East Granada, because nobody crosses the street in the middle of Granada because you can't cross, you know where that goes. So we need to think about why we want things to happen and then make them happen, I think, in terms of the pedestrian landscape on that part of town. But I do think having more people, more demand in that part of town is part of the equation.
Okay, this card has several, I think, comments, but I think the two questions at the top that come first are water line project timeline and why does the sewer plant stink?
I think we're,
Handheld? You have the handheld?
the handheld? Yeah, right. Well, we don't have it, but here's my lavalier.
Okay, Hal, I got the why does the sewer plant stink, but what was the first part of it?
It had to do with the water line project. Why is it, I guess, take time? The timeline for a water line project.
A water line installation, you have to figure we have to dig up the ground, put the new pipe in, cover it over. But part of the real process is we then have to get certified by the Department of Health to ensure that that line is available to take water. So that turnaround time takes a little bit of time. Then we got to cover it back up after all the inspections and approvals have been done, and then resod and work, and then you're ready to go. So it does take a long time. We've been on a program for 6 years to replace 2-inch water mains with 6-inch water mains to give you better pressure and better availability of water. The sewer plant stinks because it's a biological process, and we have to clean it before we send it to the river or to the reuse plant. So that's about the best I can do on that one.
Pretty good. Who is our tree person, arborist? What rules do we have for replacing trees that are cut down?
Yeah, we have several arborists, and basically when a project comes through, there is an independent arborist that is required of the applicant. So our city landscape architect is the one who reviews trees. Our building official is an arborist, and one of our planners is also an arborist. Again, the tree regulations require 15% of a site to be preserved. It also requires landscape buffers, and it requires for the trees that you're removing to replant in those landscape buffers. So in a 30-second speech, that's how our tree preservation currently works.
Okay. As we are adding new assisted living facilities, what is the infrastructure plan for improving emergency services?
Emergency services are handled by Volusia County. I don't, other than they're handled by Volusia County, I don't know. Shanahan has an answer.
Can you hear me? Emergency, the ambulance service is provided by Volusia County. The city does not provide ambulance service, but we do have paramedics, and they are our first responders. And quite honestly, the first responders want to get there as quickly as possible, and they want to stabilize you before we take you to the hospital. Sometimes that takes 15, 20, 30 minutes before we can get you stable enough to transport you to ensure your survival. We have had some discussions at the county level, and some communities do transport, but on a very limited basis. Most communities, cities that is, have one ambulance for their whole city, and it's in the rotation for Volusia County. So let's say there was a ambulance stationed at Wilmette. Y'all know where the Fire Station 92 is? So if it was in the system, because the county controls that, they could call and say, we need the closest ambulance to Granada Boulevard at the McDonald's. And so that ambulance would go. Or they could say, we need an ambulance in Holly Hill, and that ambulance would have to go, and then we wouldn't have any ambulances for the rest of us. So we have heard from the county that there's some interest in looking at how we can improve that system, and we're willing to be a partner in that.
And I will just point out the September 25th meeting in this series is dedicated to public safety, fire, and emergency preparedness. I would think that that could be taken up in greater detail then.
Okay, the question I pulled from this table's bowl is, does the city plan to hire an environmental expert as an employee or to consult on current and future development?
Not to my knowledge.
How do we maintain small town feel as we develop?
I'm going to jump in. You're welcome to answer. But one of the questions at the end of the meeting today is, what's it most important to achieve, and what are the opportunities and challenges? And I would urge whoever submitted that to think about that as you submit your answers to those questions. Sometimes the question is really a suggestion. It sounds like you want to do that very much. So
It's not a community development tactic in Stephen's sense, but my answer to that is always support local business. That's how you maintain a small town feel.
Who is responsible for planning and executing road and bridge expansions?
There are a number of entities. The Florida Department of Transportation maintains and plans state highways, such as Granada Boulevard, Nova Road. The Volusia County has responsibility for other corridors, such as Hand Avenue, Clyde Morris, Williamson. And the city is a partner with both of those, trying to get projects. One of the most important projects that we see is the extension of Hand Avenue to provide relief off of Granada. So there is a transportation workshop in the July meeting, so that can be further expanded there.
Very same question about arborist, and I think. So if y'all don't mind, I'll go to the next table. I thought y'all's. what's being done to add parking downtown?
There's a recent parking addition on Lincoln Avenue. I think it's around 30 or 35 spaces.
68, I think. 40 spaces.
40 spaces, thank you. So that's an addition of the parking. As part of the downtown master plan, I would expect parking would be a dominant feature. I don't know if Julia wants
For those of you who are not aware, thanks to the good graces of Dorian Burt, who did the negotiation, the school system has agreed to allow us to use the parking lot at Ormond Elementary, which is at the corner of Ridgewood and Granada. That is public parking 24/7 now. So you can always park there because nobody ever parks there.
Okay, so another tree question. A replacement tree provides for fewer ecosystem services than an old oak tree. Are the replanting requirements greater than a 1-to-1 ratio to replace those lost services more quickly?
The ratio is determined by a mitigation form that our city landscape architect does. Typically, they're 4.5-inch caliper trees. There's also an environmental workshop, civic engagement in August, and that could probably be a good place to discuss that a little bit more.
Okay. Why is downtown Main Street beachside filled with so many blighted sites and is so pedestrian unfriendly?
Each site has its own little story. Our famous 101 East Granada, the former Food Lion building, has an absentee landlord who is not interested in what's happening here at all. We're very fortunate, actually, in downtown. Most of our landlords are local, which means we can talk to them, we can use our powers of persuasion, we can suggest things. But there are some who are not local and not interested. And I think every downtown has that one terrible hole. We're at a workshop with a gentleman named Peter Kajiyama who does city restructuring, and he talks about psychic centers in cities, and they can be both positive and negative. And many cities, like our lovely 101 East Granada, has a negative psychic center. I dream at night about things I can do to that building, but none of them are permittable. I think that part of the issue for East Granada specifically, and I will answer the question, is that we need to understand what we want it to be. And that, I think, is part of the downtown master plan reworking. The last downtown master plan was done prior to the recession. And some of the things that were imagined are not things that are doable. But I think it's time for us to talk about what's doable, what we want that corridor to be. Who's it for? What can we encourage there?
What is the process to change zoning to an area? Does the county have to approve a change to a city zone change?
Volusia County does not have to approve a change. Typically, depending on the zone you go to, you would have to change both the land use, that comprehensive plan bubble, and the land development code bubble, which is the zoning. So you would typically have a land use change and a zoning change. It would go before the city's planning board and then the city commission.
Again, how do we maintain a small town feel as we develop? Do the existing residential neighbors of the Granada Point all approve of the project?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer for that. There was, again, neighborhood meetings. Notice went out 600 feet, and then there were public hearings with notices to the abutting neighbors. Some came to the planning board and city commission, but I can't speak to every neighbor.
where are we with recruiting companies with higher paying jobs in Ormond Crossing?
Ormond Crossings just has Security First under construction. So that is a local business that is the first project with Ormond Crossings. There is active recruitment. One of the challenges with Ormond Crossings is the infrastructure or lack of it. So basically the extension of water, sewer, and roadways. So it's a balancing act of trying to promote that economic development and providing the infrastructure needed.
How often is the comprehensive plan updated?
It's updated on a as needed basis. So if you have applications or if you have policy changes, it can be amended, again, going through the planning board and city commission. If there are state mandates that require the amendment, those will proceed forward.
Well, if I did your table, I want to go ahead and get other tables in, if you don't mind. Thank you. Well, with these tables kind of intermixed, it's hard to figure out which ones I've already done and which ones I haven't. Why does the city allow filling of lots when it kills the trees that are left?
The filling of lots is required by the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agencies. So there's a certain elevation that those properties need to get to in order to be developed. So that has impacts to the trees, and then basically that fill in the floodplain also has compensating storage. So you don't want to fill in a floodplain without providing compensating storage. So that water that would have been in that floodplain now is in that stormwater retention so that it doesn't have negative impacts to the surrounding properties.
Okay. What can be done now to slow down traffic on Granada, Beachside, and A1A, and to make that intersection and those roads more pedestrian and bicycle friendly, including enforcement?
Enforcement obviously is a police function. Again, working with our partners through the Florida Department of Transportation, Volusia County, each of these projects has a traffic study which is analyzing not only the roadway but the intersections. Again, we're going to have a transportation civic engagement meeting which will have our public works and our engineering staff who can go through that transportation.
So one of the things you can do is come to that meeting, July
Correct.
24th.
Next month.
We hope to see you all there.
Why are planning board meetings not open to public?
All the city meetings are open to public. They're all advertised.
Excuse me, sir.
They're advertised in the newspaper. We'd love to see you at the planning board meetings. They're the second Thursday of every month.
You talked about vacant properties. It only seemed to be undeveloped properties. How do you measure acreage of developed commercial properties that are vacant, unoccupied?
We haven't done that analysis. Vacant property changes, month to month, so we could do an analysis and go, business by business, shopping center by shopping center to find out what the vacant existing commercial is. Probably some of the real estate professionals in the room could also give us an answer.
Last month, it was stated at a meeting that I attended that the commercial vacancy rate in Ormond Beach is 4%.
Is there a mandatory green space requirement when commercial property is requesting development?
Yes, our land development code again establishes those standards. So if you're along Granada, there is a green belt buffer required. Sometimes it is a natural buffer, sometimes it is a planted buffer. There's also buffer requirements next to residential. There's screening wall requirements. So yes, our land development code requires buffering on all four sides of a property.
Okay. Are all master plans and comprehensive plans on your website? And if so, where can they be found?
They are, I know the downtown master plan is, I know the comprehensive plan. I'm not sure about the stormwater and utilities. We could obviously put those on there. So it would be ormondbeach.org. If you're seeking the downtown and the comprehensive plan, those would be under the planning webpage. And we can work to put on the other ones, absolutely.
Okay. Is there a fence erection type and height for residential privately owned property in the city?
For single-family residential, it's based on where on the property you're putting your fence. So in the front yard, it's a maximum of 3 feet for a solid fence, and you can do a 6-foot open style fence. As you get in the side and rear yard, you can do a 6-foot open fence or a 6-foot closed fence. An open fence is like a simulated wrought iron. In the side and the rear, you could do chain link.
We have such limited sidewalk space on Granada between Beach and US 1. Is there any concept or type of plans to address this?
Basically, there's been projects that have sought to, for lack of a better term, even out the sidewalks. So, some of the pavers have set, but there really isn't a project to expand it. There are buildings and then the street, so basically there's limited width to expand it. So, if you have any other thoughts.
How are you going to handle traffic on Granada? There is no emergency lane on Granada. Trees in the median will blow over during a hurricane.
Traffic along Granada is handled through traffic studies, which are prepared by professional engineers. They're reviewed as part of the development process, and there are certain level of service standards, which again are established in that comprehensive plan.
What are you going to do to help with flooding in the Ormond Terrace neighborhood?
I don't know I have a specific answer for you. I can get in touch with our engineering staff and see what the issues are.
Is there any table I missed? Did I get every table?
Okay.
All right, let me go ahead and take a minute to remind you that while we were very quick in selecting just one out of each of your bowls, I think there is a commitment to compile these questions and get back to you and provide an answer on each of these cards that you've put in the bowl.
Yes. And again, within 10 business days or so, well, actually, within 10 business days, they'll be online. Something we forgot to mention earlier, you'll see some easels at the back of the room. If there is anything you want to say that doesn't fit in any of the categories we talk about this evening, if you put it on the comment wall easels, it will also be included in the transcript of the meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
Stephen and Julia, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'd like to turn now to getting some feedback from you. We've been focusing on the information presented and clarification of it. We'd like to ask you all a few questions that you can answer with these key fobs at your tables with the polling devices that will sort of set the stage for the input that we would like you to offer individually. I need the clicker, whatever this is called. We will make relatively limited use of these this evening. We are hoping that many of you will be with us. We're actually hoping that all of you will be with us for the subsequent meetings. And we may make more extensive use of this, this technology at those meetings, so consider this sort of a familiarization as well as an opportunity to provide feedback. Okay, so we're going to walk through an example first to explain how this works, and then we're just going to pose a couple of questions to you and ask you to use the fobs at your table, the polling devices, to respond. Does anybody not have one? Can everyone locate one to use at your table? If you do not and want one, raise your hand. Do you have? You've got it. Okay. We should have enough for everyone at the tables. Okay, so to start, each question will appear on the screen. This is not one of the things we're most interested in, but we'll start here. Which of the following flavors, ice cream flavors, let's say, do you like best? Milk chocolate, dark chocolate, strawberry, vanilla, rhubarb, or castor oil? We had Eye of Newt up there, but decided that was taking it too far. So which of these do you like best, or other? Wait for polling to start. So I will tell you when the poll is open for you to respond with your key fob, with your polling device. So I'm going to open the poll on this question. So look at your polling device. It has numbers from 1 to 9. And so to tell us which of these flavors you like best, you will press the number and then press send. If you do not press send, we won't be able to register your vote. So, or your response. So you press the number and then you press send. Right now we're up to 90 to 102. We would actually like to ask all of you to answer this question, and that will give us a sense of how many people are in the room and how long we need to keep the poll open for the more substantive questions. So again, everybody pick one of these and hit send, and we'll have a sense of how many people are in the room. You may not be able to see it, but in the bottom left corner is a number over 300. Right now we're up to 198 over 300. We had 300 seats in the room. I would think we have more than 199 people in the room. Is there anybody, if you haven't responded, please do, just so we can get a fairly good estimate of how many people in the room. Okay, it's still ticking. We're at 203. So again, you hit the number with your choice, and then you hit send. Once you have pressed send, you cannot change your selection. You can change it before you press send. If you look at the bottom of your polling device, there is a clear button. If you press that after you've pressed a button, but before you send, you can still change your selection. Once you have hit send, you cannot change that selection. Okay, so I'm going to say something like, polls are closing, make your selection now. We're up to 208, and then I will proceed to the next slide. And it takes several seconds. It takes about 5 seconds to process your input. And a bar graph should appear here momentarily. So it's very difficult to see, but it proceeds from 1 to 7. The choices start at the left. Dark chocolate is the runaway favorite with 34%, followed by vanilla and milk chocolate. 2% went for rhubarb, 5% went for castor oil, and 12% went for other. So this will give us just a sense of how you feel at the start of this process. Yes?
If you continue to push the button and enter, does it keep going? Because I did it probably 30 times for dark chocolate.
No, you cannot. You cannot vote multiple times once you have hit send.
Okay.
If you press the button multiple times, for example, if you were pressing number 2 3 times, it would register it as 222, which isn't an option. It'll accommodate multiple digits in a number. So if you kept pressing the same one multiple times, you'll simply nullify your vote because 222 isn't one of the options. It only takes one. It only takes one. Any other questions on how this works? Is there anybody? Okay, so Hal or Ned, anything I missed? No? Okay, so we're going to go on to the first question. So wait for the polling to start. Don't press anything yet. We'd like a sense of where folks in the room live tonight. Ormond Beach, Ormond by the Sea, Holly Hill, unincorporated Volusia County. In other words, the jurisdictions surrounding Ormond Beach, and people living in those jurisdictions might well feel a strong enough connection to be here tonight, or somewhere else. So is that clear? Anyone? Okay, so the poll should be open. Let me try this. I want to make sure I don't proceed too far. Ned, is it? Okay. There we go. So go ahead and make your selection. The poll is open. Polls are open. Okay. There are versions of this system that are lightning fast. We don't have one of them. Okay, we're up to 153. Please make your selection. We had 199 in the room. We'd like to hear from everyone if you're, and by the way, this is anonymous. We have absolutely no way of tracing your answers on this or on anything tonight back to an individual. You are, of course, free to sign your comment if you want to, but we're proceeding on the assumption that all input tonight is anonymous. Okay, polls are closing, going once, going twice. Anyone else? Okay. One more. It'll continue registering until the, I believe, until the bar graph shows up, which again takes, okay, so 86% of the folks in the room reside in Ormond Beach, 2% in Ormond by the Sea, 0, no one in Holly Hill, 6% in unincorporated Volusia County, and 4% in somewhere else. So thank you. That's helpful. Okay, so the next question. What do you feel is your strongest connection to Ormond Beach? We have, I am sure, folks in the room who fall into multiple categories, but as a resident, as a business owner, you simply work in the city, or something else. So again, number one is as a resident, number two is as a business owner, number three is you work in the city, or number four is other. And we fully recognize you may have multiple connections to the city. We would just like to know what you feel your strongest connection is. Polls open. Okay. Okay. We're up to 173. Go ahead and make your selections, and polls will close momentarily.
You could wait until you see the little box at the bottom of the screen before you tell them the polls open, because they may be pushing it too soon.
I thought I did, but thank you. Yep. Okay. Okay, polls are closing. Make your final selections. There we go. 89% of you feel your strongest connection as a resident, 2% as a business owner, 3% you work in the city, and 4% other. So there's a total of 11% of you who feel your strongest connection is something other than living in the city. Okay, so the next question. Is that the next question? Okay, overall, how well has the city of Ormond Beach addressed community development? That's not the question. The question that's up there should be the third question on your Yeah, look at the front of your agenda. There are 2 more questions we wanted to pose to you. And that is one of the questions we're going to ask you, by the way, but it's just not the one that has these responses. Yeah. Let me just check with Ned. Yeah, okay. So, ignore the question at the top of the screen. The question we want you to answer is, how would you rate Ormond Beach as a place to live? So, if you choose a 1, you're saying Ormond Beach is wonderful. This is your favorite place to live in the whole world. If you choose 9 and you have choices from 1 to 9, it's a scale, it's a continuous scale. A 9 means you think it's a terrible place to live. You've got the moving van ready, you're leaving tomorrow. It's a scale from 1 to 9. How would you rate Ormond Beach as a place to live? So don't press your buttons yet. Hold on just 1 second before you select. I'm told we have to wait till that little box appears at the bottom of the screen. So, okay, go ahead and make your selections. How would you rate Ormond Beach as a place to live on a scale from 1 to 9? Is the scale clear? I don't know if it's visible from the back. A 1, again, is wonderful. A 9 is terrible. And I think actually we got a response from everybody on this one. More of you are responding than told us about your favorite ice cream flavor. Okay, make your selection. Polls will be closing momentarily. Okay, polls are about to close. Polls should be closed. Okay. There you go. 28% of you gave it a 1. It's wonderful. Your favorite place to live. 16% a 2. 22% a 3. So between those, it's 76% gave it a 1, 2, or 3. Very good ratings. There actually are a couple at the other end of the scale. There are 12 who gave it a 4, 13 who gave it a 5, and then 4, 3, 1, 2, respectively, for 6, 7, 8, and 9. So for those of you who gave it a lower rating, I'm going to add a little request, which is to tell us why on a Post-it and put it up on the comment wall. All of you who gave it a positive rating, feel free to do the same, but those low ratings are a concern. There aren't very many of them, but we'd like to know what it is that led you to rate it 6, 7, 8, or 9. But again, 76% of you rated it a 1, 2, or 3. When you add in the other 4 and 5s, it's very close to 100%. Okay, so the next question. How much impact does the City of Ormond Beach's approach to community development have on residents' quality of life? So the things we've been talking about tonight, the things you heard about from Stephen, from Julia, the things that were addressed in the question, it's a very broad question. And again, it just sort of sets a starting point for the discussion. How much impact do those have on residents' quality of life? Again, you have a 1 to 9 scale. A 1 means a very great deal of impact on your quality of life. A 9 means not very much impact on your quality of life. And you can choose anything in between. Again, 1 is the highest score, 9 is the lowest.
The question, are you asking what the potential is for a community development to have on the quality of life, or what the actual effect this city's development has on our quality of life?
I'm actually asking about the city's policies. It says the city's approach,
So it's the city's approach, not the potential of a community development.
not, right. It's the city's approach to community development. The decisions it makes according to the regulations it adopts, not a particular development and not a board, but its approach to the topic of community development. Okay, I'm going to open the poll. Wait one moment. These are very important questions. They're sometimes a bit squishy. So, okay, the poll's open. Go make your selection. Okay. We're up to 191. So again, make your selection. The polls will close here momentarily. Okay, going once, going twice. Polls are closed. So it looks like 53% of you think that has a great deal of impact. 14% gave it a 2, 17% a 3, and then much smaller, under 10% for each of the following options. So fairly important. Should be moving on. Do I need to? Okay. The next question is the one we had up earlier. How well has the city of Ormond Beach addressed community development over the past 10 years? Very well is a 1. Very poorly is a 9, and you can choose any point on that scale. A 1 to 9 scale, 1 is best, 9 is worst. How well has the city of Ormond Beach? Okay, we're going to start the polling. Okay, polls are going to close here momentarily. Okay, polls are closed. Okay, so there's quite a spread here. 24% of you said it's done very well at handling community development over the past 10 years. And that's on average. It doesn't mean everything's gone perfectly, but overall, 24% gave it a 1. 11% gave it a 9, very poorly. And you can see the spread in between is pretty even. 12% 2s, 12% 3s, 9% 4s, 14% 5s, right in the middle. It's the midpoint of the scale. 8, 7, and 4% for 6, 7, and 8, and then back up to 11% for 9. So clearly for 24% 1s, 12 and 12, For 2s and 3s, that's about a little under 50% gave it a 1, 2, or 3. The rest of you gave it a lower score. So there's room for improvement. Okay, so we're going to switch gears here and move into the table discussions. Hal.
We've heard from you collectively. Now we want to give you a chance to not only provide individual input, but to share that input with each other at your tables. So we've got about 30 more minutes. So we're going to focus that time on you at your tables. Now, there are really two parts to this discussion. What I want you to do, first of all, is turn to page 3 in that agenda packet. That's what I'm looking at. That's what the ground rules that we're going to use here for your table discussions. And again, this is an effort to make an opportunity for everybody to get your input in. We've got such a large group. We designed this to be the most efficient way to get everybody. And I will make a note that all of your Post-its will be compiled and made a part of the report out from this meeting. Okay? You have Post-its in front of you and you have pens. You also have a large sheet of paper on the two actually, one on top and one underneath. I'm going to ask you in the first part of your discussion to focus on the first two questions that are listed on the paper and listed here in your instructions. First thing I want you to do is take about 10 or 12 minutes and share with each other, what do you value most about living in Ormond Beach? Your score up here says you love the place. What is it about the place that you like? And what I want you to do is I want you to start off by picking the person at your table whose birthday is closest to today's date. That person gets to start. And from that person, go around clockwise, each person offering one suggestion. Not only share it with your table members, but write it down on your piece of paper. Listen up for a second. And put it on the page under value most. Go around, offer one, not 4 or 5, just one. If you don't want to offer one, you pass. But go around once, and once you've done that, go around a second time if you have more than one to offer. Okay? Then you're going to do the same thing after about 10 minutes, and we'll say time for opportunity. I'm sorry.
I'm up here.
Okay.
I just want to say, this is a little more complicated. Please don't start your table discussions until Hal has walked through the steps. We know you're anxious to do so, but it'll be a lot easier to follow what we're asking you to do if you can hold off for just a moment more.
Having discussed what you value most, what I'm going to ask you to do on the bottom half of that page is do the same process, one at a time, go around, and offer what are the principal opportunities and challenges that Ormond Beach faces in handling development in the future. After you've done each of those, we're then on the bottom of the page, the second page, going to come back at the very end, and the last 5 minutes, we're going to ask you each to offer one. Each one of you will offer one single most important thing for Ormond to achieve in its approach to community development over the next 5 years. So start off by looking at what you value most, then what are the opportunities and challenges, and then we'll prompt you to say, okay, in the last 5 minutes, offer us that one thing that's the most important thing for Ormond Beach to achieve in its community development in the next 5 years. So start with the person whose birthday is closest today and just go around the circle one at a time. Okay? Questions? And we'll be walking around between the tables, so if at any point during your discussion you have a question, raise your hands. We'll be happy to come answer it. So go. Again, remember to write your ideas, as many as you want, ideas for the value, most, and opportunities on your Post-its and put them on the paper. That's how we're going to be able to record them. Your conversation, we can't. That's how we capture your comments. Yes.
Do you have any? Okay. Again. Yes. Yes, sir.
If you're going to get those responses done in 10 days, you better get a very good subcontractor.
Well,
You've got a lot of stuff to respond
I
to.
am sure we do.
And to make a knowledgeable response is much better than a quickie response to meet the 10 days. I would suggest if it takes more than 10 days, take the time to get it done. And put them up incrementally if you have to.
We might, if it really is more than staff can handle, we can certainly put up an initial response and then say more to
There's
follow.
a lot of questions in those pots. And
That's
people-
good. That's really good.
People want a good response. They don't-
Yeah, I'm
but
sure they
you
do.
Give them something quick, but take your time to get it, okay?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Excuse me. Oh, good. Okay. Good. Good. Okay.
I know. Okay. Can I get your attention for just 1 second? 1 second. Oh, I'm done. All right, let me take 20 seconds for those literalists in the room. What I want you to do now is go ahead, if you haven't already done so, move to the third question. Now, I want you to note how many people are at your table. You will have that many Post-its on your second page here. One Post-it, one idea from each person. Each of you will say what you think is the single most important thing for Ormond Beach to achieve in its approach to community development in the next 5 years. Now, everyone at your table may have the same idea. That's fine, but put it down that many times. And so put your idea, so there should be as many Post-its as there are people at your table on that second page. Okay? Staff will start to come around and collect your first sheet, the values and opportunities challenges sheet, and post them in the back. So those of you who want to can look at what other tables said on your way out. But right now, focus on that third question. One last thing I want to ask of you, as some of you look like you're finishing up and trying to get out the door. The last page of your agenda packet is an evaluation form. That's very important to us, particularly the facilitators, for you to give us guidance on the evaluation sheet on the last page of your agenda packet. It's very important for you to give us feedback. Does this process work for you? Let us know. Give the ratings, but also give us comments, and those will be included in our report too. Please do your evaluation form in the back of the agenda packet before you leave this evening. Just leave them at your tables. We'll pick them up.
Okay, if we could have your attention one more moment, please. We're very close to the end of the meeting time. You are welcome to stay and continue these discussions. My understanding is we do not have to leave the room, but we want to respect the closing time we put out at the beginning of the meeting. So again, just make sure you've answered that question. What's the single most important thing for the city to achieve in this area? Please fill out your meeting evaluations, as Hal said. Thank you so much for coming, and we will transcribe this as quickly as we can. So keep an eye on the city website, and again, no later than 10 business.
Once again, thank you all so very much. We appreciate your feedback. Our next meeting time is July 24th, and we're going to talk about transportation. July 24th, and we're going to talk about transportation, same location, same time. You also have these little Ormond Beach Life clings on your table. You can peel it off and stick it on your window. It won't damage anything. And just stick it on your window, just the Ormond Beach way of life. That's what we're all about. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Oh, one more. Let's give a big thank you to Raphael and Hal. Great job, gentlemen.